G'day, welcome to the program. I'm David Lipson. It's 6 months since the budget was handed down and there are still more than $28 billion in savings being held up in the Senate. And though the House of Representatives returns next week, the crucial Senate has only 3 sitting weeks left before the summer break. The government insists it hasn't given up the fight, but each day that passes equates to savings lost. And Labor, which along with the crossbench is blocking the savings, even claimed this week, rather flippantly, it could deliver a surplus sooner than the coalition. Here's Bill Shorten with David Spears earlier this week.
When will we get back to surplus? When do you think we should get back to surplus?
Well, we're more likely to get back to surplus under a Labor government than this current mob.
The Finance Minister, Senator Matthias Cormann, joins me now from Perth. Thanks for your company today. Is Bill Shorten right?
Good to be here. He's dreaming. I mean, the Labor Party has not delivered a surplus in Australia for 25 years. And the problem that the Labor Party has today is that Bill Shorten is an economic girly man. He doesn't have what it takes to repair the budget mess that they have left behind. He doesn't even have what it takes to get Labor to support their own savings that they themselves initiated and banked in their last budget in government under Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd. I mean, the truth is that the Labor caucus rolled Bill Shorten, forced Bill Shorten to oppose Labor's own savings. So what hope do we have for Labor under Bill Shorten's leadership ever to repair the budget? Because, I mean, if Bill Shorten now is telling us that he would bring the budget back into surplus more quickly, given that he's starting from way behind, on the back of opposing our budget savings measures to a large degree, well, he really has to tell us. What is he going to do? Where is he going to cut deeper? Where is he going to increase taxes in order to not only make up the ground but get into surplus more quickly? I mean, we can't take what he says seriously in any way, shape or form.
Labor is blocking the savings, or some of the savings it took to the election, and that is reprehensible. But you are trying to legislate some things that you specifically ruled out before the election as well. For example, cuts to higher education. Is that any better?
We're not doing anything that we ruled out before the last election. I mean, before the last election, we said we would keep the same funding envelope in place for health and for education as was in place at the time of the last election, and we are. But of course, what we are doing is we're ensuring that we're putting in place the necessary efficiencies to ensure that, for example, access to high-quality healthcare, timely and affordable access to high-quality healthcare remains sustainable and remains affordable for taxpayers over the medium to long term. And in higher education, we're working very hard to ensure that students across Australia can have access to the best possible universities, and that the universities are given the best possible opportunity to be responsive to student needs, to be responsive to the needs of the economy, and to be responsive to the needs of the Australian labour market as it evolves from time to time.
Well, it's not just Labor, of course, blocking these savings measures. It's also the Palmer United Party. And it's been reported that you met with Clive Palmer for a couple of days this week in Queensland as part of a sort of charm offensive. How are negotiations going with the leader of the Palmer United Party?
Well, the first point I would make is that there's nothing new about me having conversations on behalf of the government with Mr. Palmer. We have been doing so ever since the Senate changed on 1 July this year. Mr. Palmer is the leader of a political party which has got 3 senators in the Australian Senate. He's got an alliance with another senator from the Australian Motoring Enthusiast Party. We need 6 senators in order to get any legislation through, and when given that Labor and the Greens are putting politics ahead of the national interest, of course we've got to have conversations with Mr. Palmer and other senators on the crossbench in relation to our budget measures. Now, what I would say is that I've found Mr. Palmer very good to deal with. He's clearly an impressive individual. He's unlike Labor and the Greens, and unlike Bill Shorten and Christine Milne, he's focused on engaging constructively with the government around finding common ground on some of the structural reforms that Australia needs in order to put ourselves on a stronger foundation for the future.
Have you not found him to be somewhat erratic? Because that seems to be the reputation that he's gained here in Canberra for, saying one thing and doing something pretty different within weeks?
Well, look at the outcomes. I mean, up until 30 June 2014, we were not able to get any of our important economic reforms that we had taken to the last election through the Senate. The Senate, controlled by Labor and the Greens until 30 June this year, blocked our commitment to scrap the carbon tax, blocked our commitment to scrap the mining tax. I mean, both the carbon tax and the mining tax are now gone. We've been able to deliver about $50 billion in savings by getting rid of the unfunded promises that Labor had attached to their failed mining tax. And you know what? I mean, most of the budget has actually gone through the Parliament. Most of the budget has gone through the Senate. What we're now talking about are structural reforms, many of which don't take effect until 2015, 2016, 2017 and even beyond. I mean, we've got a 4-year plan in our budget and we're implementing it. We're pursuing those measures through the Parliament in a sequential and prioritised way, as is entirely rational for us to do.
Clive Palmer's been adamant that he won't support a co-payment, a GP co-payment in any form. He's also not a fan at all of the changes to university funding and arrangements there as well. What about the fuel excise, though? Have you had any progress in discussions there?
Well, let me just reconfirm again, the government remains committed to all of the budget measures that we delivered in May. We're pursuing implementation of all of the budget measures, and we're having conversations with relevant crossbenchers represented in the Senate and in particular the leader of the Palmer United Party, Mr. Palmer, in relation to all of these matters. So we are continuing to pursue our policy to introduce a price signal when it comes to accessing medical services, and that is because we want to ensure that access to medical services remains affordable and sustainable over the medium to long term. We continue to pursue important reforms to our higher education system, and we're continuing to pursue our policy to reintroduce indexation of the fuel excise in order to ensure that the real value of the excise on fuel keeps pace with inflation and doesn't continue to fall on an ongoing basis.
But is that the next cab off the rank? I mean, to me, it seems like a no-brainer that saving. It is still being blocked, though, by the Greens and Labor, and no sign of light or an opening from Clive Palmer there either.
Well, it is a completely unbelievable situation that the Greens, under Christine Milne's leadership, now are standing for a policy which leads to regular reductions in the real value of the excise on fuel. I mean, it just shows you to what degree Christine Milne and the Greens are putting politics ahead of the national interest. I mean, to what degree they're putting politics ahead of their own policy convictions. This is not about what the Greens believe in. This is about playing politics in the Senate and trying to exercise power for the sake of power rather than to do what is right.
Okay, so do you still stand by then the budget estimate that the government could wipe off $20 billion from the deficit by the end of the financial year? Because Joe Hockey has said that the budget will take a hit, and we'll see that in my EFO. But does that sort of deficit reduction still stand?
Well, we've made significant progress when it comes to repairing the budget mess that we've inherited from the Labor Party. But, I mean, having said that, of course, yes, I mean, since the budget was delivered, there have been a series of events that were not predicted at the time of the budget. We've had to boost investment in our national security, $630 million in additional expenditure on national security. We have become engaged in global efforts in Iraq. And of course that comes with a cost. There has been some impact from delays in budget savings, not as significant as people might think, but there have been some impacts. And of course, yes, I mean, everybody knows that commodity prices have fallen much deeper, much more significantly than what was predicted at budget time. But having said all of that, I mean, at any one point in time in any budget, there are movements up and down in various parts of the budget, and we do have an orderly process to provide updates on the state of the budget. And the next update on the state of the budget will, of course, be the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook to be released in December.
Okay, well, we've got some pictures here of the Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Milan at the ASEM summit, which was held there. She was seeking assurances on the crash site of MH17, and it seems did get some sort of assurance from the Russian president, despite the comments that were fairly robust, you'd have to say, from the Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, that he would shirt front Vladimir Putin at the G20 in Brisbane next month, or later this year. Could all this chest-beating, Minister, actually derail or at least overshadow in any way the agenda that is set down for the G20?
No, I think that the Prime Minister's comments were entirely appropriate. They reflected the mood of the nation, given the terrible events earlier this year when Russian-backed rebels shot down a plane with 38 Australians on them. But of course, what we want Mr. Putin to do is we want Mr. Putin to use his influence to ensure that those that are guilty of what happened there are brought to justice, and we want Mr. Putin to use his influence to help ensure that there is appropriate further access to the crash site. As Foreign Minister Bishop has said, we do believe, and Malaysia and our friends in the Netherlands believe, that it would be useful for one more access to the crash site, and of course these are all matters that need to be resolved, and Mr. Putin should be exercising his influence in order to help make that happen.
And he has given an assurance that he will do that. How seriously does the government take an assurance like that from President Putin?
Well, let's see what happens. I'm not going to provide a running commentary. Obviously it's good that he's given that assurance, and we'd like to see that is followed through.
Okay, and just finally, the Good Weekend in Fairfax papers today has a feature article on Arthur Sinodinos. It's been 7 months now since he stepped aside from the Assistant Treasurer role. Are you still confident that he will become Assistant Treasurer again?
Yes, I am. I mean, everything is running according to what was said back in March. Arthur Sinodinos is a very good man. He himself made the decision to step aside from the Assistant Treasury role while there is an ICAC investigation ongoing in which he is participating as a witness. And obviously, as soon as the ICAC inquiry has reported, that is the time when Arthur Sinodinos will hopefully be able to come back and assume his responsibilities as Assistant Treasurer.
Finance Minister Matthias Cormann, thanks so much for your time today.
Always good to talk to you.
After the break, we'll get the response from the opposition. Stay with us.